Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Brittany Chisnall. I'm a content marketing and media operations manager for FreightWaves, and we are so happy to present today's webinar in partnership with our friends at Turvo. Today, we're excited to be hosting a discussion around a recent partnership between Turvo, Motus Freight, and Highway that is designed to help elevate the carrier selection process and combat fraud. Joining me today are Anthony Saratelli, Director of Customer Success for Turvo, Michael Caney, Chief Commercial Officer for Highway, and Motus Freight's Director of Operations, Brad Colvin, and Chief Revenue Officer, Scott Nelson. Following their discussion, we will also be taking your questions live, so be sure to send those along as they come to you. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to our team via the audience or group chat function in your webinar console. Also, as those questions come to you for our speakers, please enter those through the Q&A box in your console, and we will answer as many of those as possible after the discussion. We'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow if you'd like to view it on demand or share it with your colleagues. At this point, I'd like to welcome our speakers to briefly introduce themselves before we kick off our discussion. Anthony, would you like to go first?
I would. Thanks, Brittany. So my name is Anthony Saratelli. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Turvo. I live in Columbus, Ohio, just a stone's throw up I-71 from the lovely gentleman from Motus. I've been with Turvo for about 3 years, and I come from about 10 years of brokerage experience. A little bit about Turvo: we're a collaborative platform for supply chain and logistics professionals. We're providing end-to-end visibility and execution, everything from appointment scheduling to orders and inventory management. And then we also have a TMS for shippers and 3PLs. And I'm really fired up about this today. Michael, I've known for a little bit of time in various capacities. I've been working with Motus for 3 years. And Michael and I are both being customer guys. We talk a lot. And one thing that we discussed, we both really feel strongly about, is that when it comes to telling or talking about our businesses, there's nothing more important than telling our customers' story. So the Motus growth story is near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited to get into it.
Awesome. Scott, do you care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Brittany. I'm Scott Nelson. I'm Chief Revenue Officer here at Motus Freight. 14 years in brokerage and 4 years here at Motus. I manage our sales team, make sure our customers are happy, and then ultimately it's my job to grow the organization. The Turvo partnership has been incredible for us, and it's been a growth catalyst for our organization for sure. And we're excited to be on the call today talking with Michael and Anthony, and I know Brad's got a lot of stuff that he wants to that he'll bring to the table from the ops side.
Awesome. Perfect segue. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. I'm Brad Colvin. I'm Director of Operations here at Motus Freight. I manage the operations team as well as our partnership with Turvo. Been here for 4 years, about 10 years now in the logistics world. Prior to being here, I was 12 years with Target Corporation in security and logistics both. So the security of freight and what Highway brings on top of my logistics experience here at Motus is, it brings a lot, and I'm excited here to share what Motus and Highway and Turvo do together.
Awesome. Last but not least, Michael.
Thanks, Brittany. I've been in this business 19 years in freight, brokerage, something. And other than my 1-year stint actually at FreightWaves, working in the sonar department, most of my time has been running and building freight brokerages, either running sales or taking over businesses or consulting. That's how I got to know Anthony. And so I love freight brokers. I'm a freight broker at heart. I've been at Highway almost a year, and I joined the company, really started out because of my relationship with our CEO, and then just saw the problem that we were able to solve. And some of what we're going to talk about today, I've lived it. I'm not unfamiliar with fraud, double brokering, theft. I've literally flown around the country in airplanes following chain of custody on loads that were stolen and warehoused and moved around. So I'm really passionate about this subject because I know what it's like to live with these problems. And so because I'm a freight broker, I love helping freight brokers, and these guys on the call are my friends. The best thing about this business is I get to work with like hundreds of my friends. And so I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk with Turvo and Motus. Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for the introductions. With that, I would love to dive right into the discussion. As we all know, fraud is a huge issue plaguing the industry today, and most companies are still trying to figure out how to protect themselves. As with any relationship, communication is absolutely critical in order for brokers and carriers to be aligned and work together for fraud prevention. Michael, I would love for you to kind of speak into that just a little bit in terms of why it's so important to add fraud detection to the tech stack.
Yeah, I mean, so I think for a long time, as freight brokers, we essentially did business on handshake. We used to send out a paper packet and get an insurance certificate, and we were like, sounds good, like, let's go. And then we got a little more technical, and we put the packet online and called it a website. We were still just letting people fill out a form and get an insurance certificate. And as the digital economy grew, we failed to evolve as an industry, like straight up, like we failed to evolve. The rest of us, like the rest of the world, we grab our phones and we hit sign in with something. There's a digital thumbprint. And so like this principle of KYC, know your customer, know your business, it's not new. Our CEO comes from investment banking and financial services. So really what we're just saying is you need to have these basic cybersecurity and fraud management provisions within your tech stack, right? So freight brokers call their carrier network a network, but they use the word network, like we use the word network. Well, networks have protection. They have access management. They need to know, who they're actually working with and talking to. And that's what Highway does. So onboarding is not the answer. Identity management and connection is key. Onboarding is just a natural thing that happens. You need to have a provider that's constantly angling to figure out how you're going to be attacked next. It's not enough to do it on your own.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Scott, you run a cradle to grave shop. So each freight broker is responsible for their own book of business. This covers everything from finding new business to working with customers to cover loads and maintaining relationships with carriers. Can you tell us what that looks like at Motus Freight?
Yeah, of course. Customer service, on-time service, it's our North Star, and our model is structured to execute on that. So we work in small tactical teams that have high customer context. Each team is led by what we call a market advisor, and that's a person that we expect to have kind of broad industry knowledge and everything from the customer side, the carrier side, to risk, to of course different kinds of cargo, and everything that their customer is asking us to execute on. Our market advisors average around 10 years of experience. So in our model, it's my job to give them the very best tools, our freight Navy SEALs, as I call them, give them the very best tools so that they can thrive in a very dynamic, fast-paced, changing, dangerous, if you want to call it, world that we live in sometimes. So we try to maximize the human with people that are experienced and know what they're doing, and then bring a great tech stack to the table. So that's how we take people, technology, and blend it in with our model.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anthony, coming over to you, I'd love to hear more about this. You're the head of customer success at Turvo, and we know there's a common theme when logistics companies think about optimizing their tech stack and enabling human capital to drive value. Can you elaborate on that and why it's so important?
Yeah, so actually I want to go back to something Michael said about that failure to evolve, and I want to talk about Motus. And part of why I feel like I have so much fun in my job is because I get to go work with our customers who have become friends and talk about what's next for their business. And I can think of countless times that we've all sat together in Motus's little boardroom, which actually isn't that little, it's pretty nice, and talked about like what's next and all of these ideas. And it's like, maybe we're not ready yet, but to watch this business evolve now to the point where they're adding this really no-brainer solution like Highway, it's just like the evolution of what makes sense. And we talk a lot about optimizing your tech stack in this space. at this point, it's almost table stakes. And I think that there's a lot of ways to think about what the value of optimizing your tech stack can be for a company like Motus. Obviously, some of those things have a direct line to the bottom line, right? We still talk a lot about revenue per head. But the thing that I find the most value in, and I really believe that this is a key growth factor for Motus, is that human capital factor. Michael said it at the outstart. This is a business where we get to work with hundreds of our friends. Every business is the relationship business, but no more so than the space that we're in. So optimizing your tech stack with solutions like Turvo and Highway allows the high quality folks that Motus hires to focus on that relationship aspect of the business to really drive revenue.
Yeah, going over to you, Scott, is there anything that you would add from Motus's perspective regarding the Turvo partnership?
Moving at speed is critical in our world. And, much of what Turvo brings to the table for us is allowing less touches, bringing data that might be under the surface, bringing that to the surface for our teams, and allowing us to move with speed. I mean, talk about not evolving. Logistics technology up until I saw Turvo was frankly that, right? Archaic, slow, clunky, and that is tough to run at full speed when you've got ankle weights on. So Turvo brings so many of the features that allow us to maximize revenue and take care of service the way we need to, and then just frankly just put out more pounds per punch. I always say we're a boxer that punches heavier than our weight class, and that allows us to be really intelligent in how we make investments in the business and manage headcount and be profitable and all those kind of good things. So it's a critical piece to what we are.
Awesome. Brad, I would love to hear from you next about your experience with the Turvo and Highway partnership as well. What kind of value have you seen since combining Highway and Turvo?
Yeah, they just talked about it, but, we chose to run our business on Turvo because it allows us to move quickly and operate efficiently. But outside of how we operate, it's extremely important to us to be able to integrate with the top technology in the market. And Turvo has simple integrations with a lot of the technology out there, and recently including Highway. We decided to partner with Highway, because they allow us to assess carriers in a very detailed and simple way. Once those carriers pass the strenuous checks they go through, it just pushes straight to Turvo, little to no manual work on our end, which is really helpful. And, more importantly, I think once that carrier is active and, if they're out in the market and some suspicious activity pops up, or, they find other things on them that fail the rules that we put in place, Highway deactivates them in Turvo immediately. So, we're not using them without some sort of further review. And Highway's changing it daily. We found out as we got on. It's been, I use the word pain, but in a great way. Like, it's been a pain for us at times where this week it's running one way and next week they add some different parameters and it flips some of our carriers off. And doesn't mean that because they're off that they're not a good carrier or somebody we should use. It just means we need to dig a little bit more. And then, Michael can speak more to it, but, we can verify they are who they say they are. They can get in there and upload some ELDs to prove themselves. They can upload some driver's license and cab cards to prove themselves. But, it gives us peace of mind that in the end of the day, the company that's supposed to be signing up and becoming the carrier is that person. And then we, of course, have our own processes when dispatching carriers to verify. But, that end of Highway is extremely important. And the fact that it doesn't just onboard a carrier and that's it, but it continues to evaluate them and let us know what's going on. And it just makes us feel good every day when we put somebody on that a week ago something didn't happen we don't know about. And Michael, you can speak more to like where you guys came up with all that or whatever, but it's great. I love it.
Yeah. Is that okay, Brittany? Can we go there for just a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think what Brad's talking about is we have three design principles. One, reduce total surface area of risk for a freight broker. Like, just shrink their ability to be attacked. Two is be the absolute hardest target. So if you're Motus or if you're a Highway broker, we are committing that you are going to be the hardest target for a bad actor in the marketplace. And then the third one is like, there's sheep and goats. There's good guys and bad guys. And like, if we don't know, we're going to say we don't know, but we are not going to apologize for introducing friction to make an unknown prove that they're a good guy. Like, we're not going to assume they're good. We're not going to assume that they're bad. We're not going to look at one-off data sets and just assume someone is bad. We are going to give them an opportunity to help heal and prove that. What Brad's talking to is I had to call him a couple of weeks ago and say, hey, you're going to hate me today. I'm going to turn off a lot of your carrier base because, and this speaks to an audience question. In this industry, we've tend to get really excited about one data set or one thing and go at it really hard. Put it on a checklist, put it in a Word document, hang it up in a cubicle, talk about it on LinkedIn, right? And then it doesn't work. Why? Because when you have one thing, the bad actors all listen to what we say and they attack that one thing, right? And so in highway, we look at a combination of things. We think about like cybersecurity, right? How are they going to be attacked next? So when we saw a lot of changes in the market and how brokers were being attacked, we pivoted the way that we weighted some things and turned a lot of carriers off. We put them in a holding pattern and allowed them to prove who they are and what they do. So there's three things a motor carrier has to prove to work with Motus or a highway broker. Number one, who are you? Like, who is this human being coming to open a digital session? Anybody listening to this call or listening to the recording, it's no different than the way that you interact with the world. You go to your bank, they're going to put you through two-factor authentication. They're going to make you prove who you are. The second thing is, are you actually the carrier versus a human trying to impersonate a carrier or a chameleon carrier or a dispatch service pretending to be a carrier or someone saying you bought an MC that you didn't actually buy. You just found a way to get control of it. We're going to make them prove that. If you can pass those two things, we're going to make you prove that you actually have the equipment to do the job Motus or highway broker has hired you to do, right? And that you claim you have. Right, so three things. Are you a human? Are you a good actor, bad actor? Have we seen you before? Are you actually the entity, and do you have the equipment? Those are the three things that have to be proven. It's a proof of stake issue. And that's what Brad's alluding to. Like, we have a way for someone who's not known. If you're a new carrier, we want you in highway. But you're going to have to prove that you're a good actor. And then once it's done, we're going to actually still protect that motor carrier from being attacked by bad actors as well. And if we see something change, we're gonna slow that carrier down, let the broker know, and find a way to heal that process and make sure that A, the carrier's not being attacked, and B, the broker's not being attacked.
Awesome.
And I don't think you can understate the importance of how Motus has adapted to these changes though. Like, we go back to this talk about an industry evolving, and that means that the individual companies and players have to evolve with it. But Motus, whether it's highway or Turvo or their whole tech stack, has a very committed strategy to adopting the technology that they're given, right? Or that they invest in. And you can't understate the importance of that adoption because it is challenging. It's challenging to learn new processes. It's challenging to buy into features that are going to automate workflows, especially when we've all lived in the broker world. It's kind of transactional. It's really hard to get folks to be like, it's not broke. Why fix it? But I think largely that's why you're seeing Motus continue to grow through a really, really challenging period in the industry. So it's really kudos to Brad, Scott, and the rest of the team.
Yeah, it really doesn't take much to see the value that you guys are delivering for your customers by addressing these issues. Michael, back to you really quickly. For highway, when it comes to the implementation process and timeline, can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. There's a lot of dependency on the broker, right? How quickly can they kind of get things together? If we're talking about Turvo, we can get a Turvo broker live in a week. Like our process is very front loaded to gather data. We give the broker an impact report. They quickly see what their current network is today, how we would adjust that, what changes would happen. And they go through a very simple question process. And like that's a day's work. That's a day's work. The integration we have with Turvo is pretty simple and straightforward. They have a great public API that we can write to. And our engineers do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's really quite simple. It's not a long drawn out thing. You know, the only challenges to integration are typically how fast can the broker move? What do they want to do with all the stuff we uncover in their network? That was a big conversation we had to have with Brad. Like, you know, we kind of turn the lights on and say, okay, what do you want to do? How do you want to handle all the stuff we've done? And then just adopting it on the floor, training. The technical integration with Turvo is very, very simple, very straightforward.
Awesome.
Anthony, you want to talk about that at all? We've done a few of these.
Yeah, I mean, from a strategic standpoint, it makes so much sense for Highway and Turvo to be partners. You mentioned our API, and I at the onset of this call, or at the start of this call, I called Turvo a collaboration platform, and really that's what our DNA is. We have a TMS within the platform. We have other features and applications within that platform, but our strategy is to be a platform that allows our customers to bring in the best tech in the world and create a tech stack that works for them. You mentioned your engineers knowing our API well and doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It's great, right? Like, you guys have been such a strategic partner for us, and we're going to continue to deepen that partnership. The seamlessness of that integration is exactly what we want all of our integrations to be, right? Just easy button, turn it on, move as fast as our customers can move.
Awesome. I'd love to dig even a little further into the value of the integration with Turvo. Scott, I know that customer experience is of the utmost importance at Turvo. So I'd love to hear from you about how the integration with Highway helps add to the experience for your customers.
Sure. Yeah. I think when it comes to customer experience, the first thing I always think about is trust, because our customers work with us because they trust us. And it, as we know in our professional life or personal life, it takes a lifetime to build it, and it can go away really quickly. You know, reputational damage from a bad load hurts, and hurts bad. But in order for us to build trust, obviously the first step in that is to put the right carrier on the right load. So I'm able to get on calls with customers or shippers that maybe we're not doing business with yet, and we're constantly asked, you know, tell me about Motus. Who are you? Where you come from? What do you do well? How are you any different than everybody else? Aside from human capital and tech stacks, we now have an answer, which is if your brokers aren't using Highway, I think you're at a severe disadvantage. And, you know, we believe that cargo that we're hauling is ultimately safer than other cargo moving on the road. And that is couldn't be a bigger deal. It's a major differentiator. And, you know, the Highway product I didn't expect it to add such a piece to the sales component of, you know, talking to shippers and talking how is Motus different, but it is, it's a big deal. So,
yeah.
Awesome.
Brittany, I want to add one thing. Just thinking, like, you know, as great as the security part was, and that's why we really set up for it, but, you know, there's other tools inside Highway around, like, lane, where we can look into lanes that carriers run, and those carriers are already partners of Highway. So it gives us that feeling of, you know, we're implementing a new carrier that has already been through Highway. Highway can show us official data that they run lanes and, you know, where their trucks have been, and they collect so much great data that allows us to do that. So when I think about service too, it's, you know, we're going to go build a carrier network that's also through Highway, and we're going to get partners that Highway's already given to us and shown us. So, you know, that was something that once we decided we needed the security, I was very excited when I saw that there's other things like that inside of it. So just wanted to be clear that it's not just an onboarding and it's not just a security tool.
Right.
It's a lane building tool and a carrier networking tool.
Yeah, rather than having carriers that say they check a box and they like to run to Pennsylvania, you know, it's backed by actual inspections along those routes. It's not guessing, and it allows us to really go to the carrier market in Highway and build deep, meaningful relationships with those carriers, which is, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There's some questions around validation too. And so when you think about, man, Scott said like my favorite thing, which is trust. And so there's some questions from the audience about validation. One of the things that I think it's important to talk about between Highway and any freight broker, and really this is a big thing at Motus, it's just kind of business fundamentals. You know, I talked to Weston and Scott and Brad and Anthony, like I don't come from software. So somebody asked me like, yeah, product-led growth or partner. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't grow up in the SaaS world. I don't know what this means. We are a trust-led growth company. Like, do what you say you're going to do for your customers. Build a solution that they trust, that can extend trust in the marketplace. Their shippers will trust them. Like, we don't sell their data to shippers, things like that. Like, everything we do is about building trust, about building a trusted platform. Our brokers can trust us. Shippers can trust the brokers, right? Validation comes into that. Like when Scott and Brad are looking at their business, they have to trust that we have their back. They have to trust that when something bad happens, we're going to respond. So much of what we do, if you listen to Jordan talk about this, he won't say we're a SaaS company. He'll say we're a service company. He'll say at the end of the day, like, there's humans on the other end of the line trying to service shippers and carriers, and we're building a service, right? And so, if something goes wrong and Scott or Brad want to call me on my cell phone, it's not only can they do. And we talk about these things. But so response time is really important. Now, with respect to validation, here's what I want to say, like, to anybody listening. Validation is not something you figure out one time and then you're done. Like, brokers are being attacked. Strategic cargo theft is up 1,300% year over year in some insurance markets. Like, there's the checklist that you downloaded from the internet today is old. By the time you have posted it to a private user group, figured it out, talked to your friends about it, it's old. That attack vector's old. They've already stolen 50 loads around the country with that attack vector. So when we think about validation, what we try to do is constantly look for what is the next potential area where a freight broker is going to get hit. And so there's multiple ways we validate contact. One of the things that we're committed to doing is constantly enriching our data so that we have more than just government data to validate against, right? Like there's a question in the chat about FMCSA data. Yeah, there's been some struggles there. Scott and I've done this for a long time. We used to just call the phone number in FMCSA and it was okay. And now, a good percentage of the time, the person answering the phone at the FMCSA is the bad guy. You have to find ways to vet that out. At Motus, they don't have to do that. We do that for them. And it's all automated into their system. So that's a little bit about validation. I know it's not, I apologize, it's not a single answer. There's deep things that live in fraud and identity management.
Awesome.
Brad, I'm going to go back to you, and I'm going to ask a selfish question. Selfish in that I do work for Turvo. You talked about how seamless this integration comes into Turvo, and we talked about that from a procurement standpoint, from a lane standpoint. Can you just talk a little bit more about how this fits into everything downstream from this part of your overall workflow? Because you run all of operations, right? And all of what Michael just touched on is a real risk to your business, because the minute something goes wrong, the time that you spend trying to make it right costs you dollars. So just talk about kind of the full end-to-end and how this tech partnership affects your ability to maximize all of your employees' time.
Yeah, I'd probably lead with, I've been in other brokerages and you have huge carrier setup departments that, are all doing the same thing. I mean, you got me and another person that manages this. Again, the seamless integration was so great because, before we used just an onboarding company, which we thought was great. It was onboarding quickly and pushed to Turvo. But now, we've got Highway that, yes, they do the onboarding. They do a lot of great checks. They push that data into Turvo. They let us know how many trucks a carrier has. So once they're in Turvo, now when I look in Turvo, I see that data and I can know, hey, this carrier's got 25 trucks, not one. I talked about it earlier. One of my favorite parts is 2 weeks from now, if a carrier has something go wrong, it also pushes back to Turvo and deactivates a carrier for me. And, I, again, don't have a carrier setup department. So I've got a team out there who's doing their best to analyze carriers, get to know them, pick the right ones, build relationships around lanes, all that stuff. So having to be able to just work in Turvo and then be told something's wrong with the carrier to go back to Highway and dig in, is great. And, the turning on of Highway was fantastic. The bumps in the road we've seen, I've been able to shoot notes back and forth to Turvo, to Highway. They communicate well. You guys partner to fix things, to add different functions. And in the couple months we've been on, I think there's been 2 or 3 changes that I needed for Motus that is in Turvo, wasn't in Highway, or was in Highway, wasn't in Turvo, and you guys were able to figure it out quickly and work together. So again, we are very lean here. We run very lean, and to not have to hire 3 and 4 people to set up carriers is worth every penny.
Yeah. Awesome. I know we've danced around this question a little bit, but Michael, I'd love to open up another opportunity to discuss how Highway helps specifically when it comes to carrier vetting and selection processes, and what do customers need to keep in mind?
Yeah, so it's not just vetting, right? Like, people talk about carrier vetting. When I think of carrier vetting, I have an 18-page PowerPoint that I show, and I go, this is the old way of doing things. And you look at 4 websites, and you check this, and you do this other thing. And Brad and I have talked about this because we joke. And then like you don't need to vet carriers. You need to work with people that have a valid identity. Like, that's the thing. So there's some questions in chat. How do we do that? We have ways that carriers can display their equipment, can show who they are. We're not after like deep visibility. I need everybody to understand that. Like, we're not trying to play Big Brother. We don't sell data. We are not a visibility platform. It's not what we do. We're not trying to figure out where truck number 7 with Joe is. What we're trying to establish is, does a carrier have equipment? If it hasn't been seen, can the carrier show it to us? So like, we are pro small carrier, right? We are pro small carrier, one, because it's most of the economy. I think 96% of fleets are still 20 trucks or less, right? But I'm also pro carrier because that's a hard business to run in a market like this. And it's even harder to run when those carriers call us and go, hey, there's some bad actors that got in with other platforms and they're pretending to be me. What can I do? Or when they call OIDA and they go, my name's being drug in the mud because somebody's pretending to be me. I didn't pick up this load. What can I do? Right. So if you're a carrier, like, we have ways to help you. We have ways that you can prove who you are to brokers and protect you. But I mean, I would say the biggest differentiation is you've got to break this thing apart in this whole vetting piece, right? There is this identity problem. And then there's like, how do I want to do business with this carrier problem? And that's not even a problem. That's just like fleet analytics. Does this guy have reefer trailers? Does he have van trailers? Does he have flatbed trailers? How old are his trailers? We're going to give you, we have the richest portfolio data in the business. So if somebody has a van fleet and the average age of that fleet is 15 years old on the trailers, well, if that's a bunch of translucent top trailers, you probably don't want to load them on food grade shipments, right? You have the ability to make that decision. You don't have to call the carrier and go, how many vans do you run? What are they? Like, we're going to give you that information at the VIN level. So to Brad's point, you can do a lot of configuration around what kind of carriers you want to work with on what kind of business without having to build these complicated carrier sales scripts like we used to have to do a long time ago. You get a list of MC numbers. Anthony and I probably did this. You strip them out a zip code. You start calling, you go, what do you do? How many trucks do you have? Where do you go? Half the people lie to you. They don't tell you the truth. What we want to give brokers the ability to do is go after the right carriers. Like, if you're a good carrier, we actually want you to have more business. Like, we want to help brokers find who you are and give you more business.
Awesome.
I have no idea if I answered your question, Brittany. Sometimes I just say words. I just get real excited and say things. I have no idea if that was helpful.
Doing great. Doing great. Before I move on here to the next thing, did any of you want to add anything to that question? Just to give you guys an opportunity. Perfect. Well, if any of our listeners today want to hear more about the integration or any of the services that you guys offer, what is the best way to reach out? And that can be any of you to answer that question.
Michael, why don't
You
you
can
go
reach me at
first?
info@gohighway.com. Any of this stuff I'm talking about, I'm happy to show you how it works, what it does. We go really deep on a couple things. It's really hard to pack into a 60-minute webinar when there's a broker and 2 different technology vendors all trying to get space, but I'm happy to show it to you. It kind of doesn't make sense until you see it. But info@gohighway.com.
Awesome. Anthony,
Yep.
what about you?
My email, this is probably the longest email you've ever had somebody give out on a live webinar, but it's Ceritelli, so ACERITELLI @turvo.com. Probably way easier just to find me on LinkedIn. If you're interested in checking out Turvo, just go to turvo.com. Contact us. We got a great team ready to roll up their sleeves and show you what Turvo can do for your business.
Cool. Scott, what about you?
Now, we've got an info button on our website, and you could, of course, reach me as well on LinkedIn or scott@motustrucking.com.
Perfect. Brad?
All the same, and we're easier than Anthony. It's just Brad@motustrucking.com.
Perfect. All right.
Someday I'm
Well,
gonna
thank you guys. Go ahead.
I said someday I'm going to get my email changed.
No worries. Well, thank you guys so much for the discussion. It's certainly encouraging to hear how you guys are all working together to address such a critical issue for the industry. And I truly can't wait to see what you guys are able to accomplish for your customers moving forward. At this point, I would like to take time for some questions from the audience. So if you have not already submitted those, please type those into the Q&A section of your control panel. It does look like we have a couple of questions so far. So let's see. Okay, so here's a question. Does your platform support carriers that does not require authority?
So all carriers have to have some type of operating authority. The question's probably related to like an MC number, like interstate authority. So if you run Texas only, California only, maybe you have a different type of authority. You're running a class 6 truck, a box truck. The short answer is yes. You know, the majority of what we do is around class 8s, full truckloads, interstate truckload. But if that doesn't exist, there is a workflow for that and a way for that carrier to be supported. What I would say though, is because of the history of relying on interstate authority, that is a big area of fraud. So don't feel offended when we slow you down and make you prove some things. Because a lot of people will use expedited shipments and things like that to try to get into a brokerage network and then do bad things once they're in the network. All right. So going to Brad's point, and there's some questions about differences I'm sure you're asking, Brittany, but I'll allude to it. A lot of what I dealt with for a long time, and again, for the audience, like lived this problem, paid a lot of invoices to a lot of technology companies. The set them up and then it's okay, like let everybody in the house and then try to kick them out. That's a problem. We want to continuously monitor things for changes. So, you know, when it comes to some of those edge cases, like intrastate carriers, we handle those a little bit different, but we do have a way for a broker to do that.
Awesome. Next question. What are your main sources of information that determines if a carrier is trustworthy?
Yeah, so there's a lot of them, and I'm not going to tell you what all of them are because it's proprietary. But what I would say is I also run partnerships, and I've got so many data partnerships working, and we've got about 10 or 15 different data sets we use today. We've got DMV partnerships. We go really deep on insurance certificates. We go really deep on VIN numbers. And so we have a big AWS bill. We've got a ton of data that we're using to try to triangulate and figure out. You know, inspection data provides a really good bedrock. Everybody likes to ask about inspection data. It's not awesome anymore. It provides a really good bedrock. And from there, you can go look at other sets of data and look for anomalies or problems. And that's kind of what we're highlighting, right? Like one of these things is not like the other. Why is this changing? Right. And so what I would say there's a lot of data that we look at.
Awesome. Next question. What insights are most concerning in your opinion? Automation to consider these data points.
Brad, you take that. What insights in highway are most important or most concerning to you?
Oh man. You know, there's been a lot of eye-opening, you know, Michael, you and I were just talking yesterday about one of my biggest surprises when I got in there were how many carriers have MC numbers that have brokerage authority that's not tied to the MC that I'm booking. So I'm booking a great carrier or somebody I think's good, but I don't realize that guy may have a brokerage authority in his back pocket that he's able to use. It doesn't mean I don't use that carrier, but it lets me know that he has some authority to do that. And I just need to make sure that he's doing things the right way and utilizing his trucks and, you know, using the brokerage authority for the things that should be used for. But since signing up with Highway, we've caught at least 3 or 4 that just didn't seem right. And then you start realizing, wait, he has brokerage authority. And then you talk to a driver and turns out that driver doesn't belong to the guy that we booked. And, it's beyond like, yes, he is who he says he is. But you have some great other data that helps us get a good feel of who that carrier is. And, there's inspection data, which is great. There's the guys who do provide ELDs, gives us data on like where they are and what lanes they like to do. And, and for the great carriers, they love that too. And we've been able to strike up great conversations with those carriers that we never would have talked to or would have taken us a lot longer to get to. Especially when we run into some customers that need a special project done, or, hey, I need this handled, and can we do it? In the past, we could have maybe with a lot of manual work. Now we can handle it. We can handle it pretty quickly with some great data that comes through Highway. So yeah, those are a lot of the things that we're using it for.
Yeah. So one of the things that Brad and I were talking about yesterday is, when you pull up a carrier and you see that either physically or digitally or both, there are these massive address associations where there's 15 and 20 MC numbers at the same digital or physical address. It kind of slows you down and you go, huh? And so what Highway do, we will show you all of those carriers and whether or not, like in real time on the same screen, whether or not those carriers even pass your rule set. So oftentimes what you can see is you'll see like a carrier will hold some MC numbers, and every time one goes bad and starts failing business rules or failing identity, they just have another one that they're going to reintroduce. Like they're laundering MCs. You don't have to like jump through hoops with Highway. Like that's all configurable for us. If you want to know what it is, like we can go show you where it comes from. Another problematic one is when carriers have trucks, they run in certain areas, and then they're failing an insight we have called load limit, or we've never seen them on the West Coast, and they're trying to call Brad and take 5 loads on the West Coast, and we're like, literally, you've never been there. Like literally, never in the history of your 3-year-old business have you ever been to the West Coast. Not going to give you loads on the West Coast unless you can prove to me that you have a truck there. So all of those are decisions. We talked about speed earlier. One of the problems with some of the education in this business is that some of the education is by people who have never brokered freight. They don't understand how fast it goes, right? So if Brad had to follow all of the checklists and education that were out there, like he wouldn't move any freight, right, Brad? Like there just wouldn't, like you wouldn't move freight. You just spend all day following checklists. Like you've got to be able to program this stuff and configure it so it's in the workflow and the broker can move fast. Otherwise, somebody's going to move at the speed required of a shipper in the market. And like, if you're a broker, you've got to find a way to keep up, and you got to find a way to do so safely.
Awesome. I think this question is for Brad and Scott. What visibility platforms is Motus using with their carrier base?
Brad, you want to take it?
Scott? Yeah. I mean, the great part is it's pretty much Highway at this point. We utilize Carrier 411. They've got some things in there that we like and that we use, but to me, Highway has it all, and the speed is so important. So I like to live in Highway and live in Turvo, and the less we're going through all these other platforms and looking into different things, the better it is for us. And I think the simple answer is we're pretty close to just being Highway. They tell us everything we need. They identify everything we need. They help us move quick, and, we're growing fast. And if we can't, like Michael said, move quick and be safe at the same time, then we're in trouble. So, we're finally down to not using 4 different websites and making phone calls and calling insurance companies and all that kind of stuff. Highway does it for us, and then we get to decide if that carrier fits the lane we're trying to book them on, not are they the carrier that we're talking to.
Yeah, and Brad, when it comes to visibility downstream, right? Like Highway's a no-brainer for you guys on the procurement side and all of the things that we've talked about, but you're probably in the top 5 Turvo customers when it comes to compliance on our driver app. And you guys have been using Turvo for carrier visibility now for 4 or 5 years.
Yep, correct. Yeah, I mean, we track about 82% of all of our loads through the Turvo driver app. We're over 90% of all reefer loads are on Turvo's driver app, and that driver app pushes directly back to Turvo. So we're not using other tools in the industry to go to their websites and pay them to tell me where a truck is. I get to do that directly through Turvo. Inside that driver app, I can communicate directly with the driver through messaging. I can, that his or her pickup numbers are in there. Everything they need is in that one spot. So between just being able to book somebody, set them up through highway, know the security of that, and then once they're in Turvo to be able to do the tracking that everybody wants, I can share that tracking with my customers. My customers, some of which are inside Turvo already, and they can just look into their shipment and they can see where that load is as well. So the visibility is almost, you had to ask me that, I think, because it's just so common that it's just part of how we do business and how Turvo does business, that you do business with us, you're on Turvo's driver app and it's all in one place and simple.
Yeah, from a visibility standpoint too, if you don't mind, we get asked we have some customers that just tell us you're going to use this system, whether it's 4Kites or P44 for visibility, and Turvo's built-in integrations with those. So we're always tracking our shipments on the Turvo driver app. And Brad, I think it's 90% is pretty much where we're at now. Aside from some local shuttle work, we're pretty much there with 100%. But also when we have to feed those other systems that some shippers are going to require, it's pretty much click a couple boxes, enter some credentials, and we're done.
Awesome. Next question for highway. Are there other points of interest or just the inspection level data to prove out prior run lanes?
Yeah, so I think we kind of covered that, but it's not just inspections. Like, when I talked about inspections is kind of where we start, because a lot of people look at that. It's not kind of the cute thing anymore. What we're really looking for is how to enhance that, right? Like a lot of carriers don't have as many inspections. They're on pre-pass, or there's just a lot of reasons that's not the only source of data, let alone the best. So we're enhancing that. Look, I've been fielding a lot of questions. Scott, this is important. I probably turned off 20% of your network when we onboarded you. Like, talk about serviceability. There's a question around service, right? Like, we eliminate a lot of bad actors. We turn off a lot of carriers, some of which we thought we were good. We realized they were double brokering. Man, how are you doing? How has that changed your ability to service customers, if at all?
Brad, you probably have a better answer on the percentage that's gone dark, but I'm sure Michael's about right. But as far as servicing our customers, we're happy to raise the bar and make. We're not looking to make their life difficult, but yeah, we want to know that the carriers that are in our network hauling our freight are vetted, checked, and the very best of the carrier market. I think the one thing, maybe we touched on it, is we want to bring the best carriers to the surface so that they're not drowned out by people that shouldn't be there, clogging up the system and making a mess for us or making a mess for our customers. It's a lot of peace of mind. It's a lot of work, and it never stops. But I feel like from a customer facing standpoint, we're on the leading edge of a big problem, and that's where we want to stay.
Perfect. Do you guys have any solutions for Canada and Mexico?
We do. Call me. Yes.
Perfect. So FMCSA DOT safety ratings, we have seen lags in updating on these. Does your system update these in real time, or is it reliant on the FMCSA?
So FMCSA data is always going to be reliant on the FMCSA. That's because it comes from the FMCSA. But again, that's why it's important to have, like, I keep getting this FMCSA question, and I know why, because it's burned all of you so bad. I get it. We have other ways of doing things. Like, please call me. Like, I get it. It's stung you. It's because it's the only thing we've been looking at. There's other things that we do. Please call me.
It's like, we talked about evolving. We talked about how you guys are creating this beautiful solution. Coming from the carrier sales world, I think the easiest way to think about it is Highway is innovating, and they're bringing something new to a part of the industry that really, really needs it. And email me. I'll give you Michael's number.
Yeah, Anthony, right? It's like customer salespeople. Like, think of it like Zoom Info.
Yeah.
Like you don't go to ZoomInfo or Apollo or Seamless and drill them on where their data comes from because it comes from everywhere. Like when you go into Highway, like you got to think of Highway like ZoomInfo for carriers. Like we get it from a lot of places and it's all there.
Awesome. Next question, where's the line drawn with regard to carriers using virtual addresses as their physical or billing address?
So let's talk about noise versus signal. That's probably the best way to cover this. So in the world that we live in as freight brokers, there's a lot of noise. And people will say things like virtual address is bad. Well, a lot of small carriers, I can't remember what they're called, Bach 3, or there's a name for them, that use, there are services that help register carriers. And so you'll see a whole lot of carriers at the same virtual address. That doesn't necessarily equal bad. So you have to look for signal in noise. So it isn't just one thing like digital addresses or IP addresses. Now, if a carrier's only ever been accessed outside of North America, we're going to tell you that. What we're looking for is there a signal coming out of all of this noise? So sometimes a carrier is going to have a virtual address and everything else looks really clean, and they use that, and it's fine. But when you see someone with 22 MC numbers associated at a couple of different virtual addresses, we're going to look for what's the signal we should be telling the broker from that data. So I'm sorry, but there isn't one answer. You have to look at lots of data and look for patterns and give the broker the signal on what pattern is evolving from the data points.
Awesome. This question's for Scott and or Brad. What do you see as the biggest challenge or threat in the freight industry today and to your business?
As far as a challenge goes, I mean, we're going into our 8th year, and we've got a lot of dreams and things we want to accomplish. So for us, it's just continuing to kind of create our spot in the market and grow it. Growing an organization is a constant challenge, and I don't know if that's more of like a boogeyman question of like what's the biggest thing that keeps you up at night. Brad and I are constantly thinking about what we need to be doing, like Anthony said earlier in the call, evolving, and that's evolving our skill sets as employees, evolving our tech stacks, evolving our strategies. But growing in an organization is a constant challenge, and that's the one I'm currently charged with being obsessed with all the time.
I'll just throw in there. I mean, when I think operationally, I mean, we have really honed in our operations as a company, and then this fraud got going, and it got bad, and it got bad quick. I'm sure anybody on this listening to this will agree that, I mean, it was almost overnight that loads were being stolen so fast, and carriers were double brokering, and the wrong carriers were picking up loads, and it surprised a lot of people. And if you didn't have something like Highway, it was just eye-opening on a daily basis. Everything changed. So when we met Highway, that was my first thought, is this is the biggest thing going right now. This fraud is the one thing that's going to lose me customers. I mean, we all know that there's a lot of brokers out there, and customers can pick anybody they want. And if you can't protect their freight and you can't send the right carrier that should be doing their freight in, they're going to find somebody else. And it was very dangerous. I mean, in my world, the operations is about servicing the customers we have and keep them going. And, the fraud just hit so fast. So it's 100% fraud in my world. And since Highway, we haven't dealt much with it at all. I see a question there, kind of hits on this, just asking, how has the scrutiny of carriers affected your ability to service your customers? And I'd say it's helped us. It's only helped us. We quickly move past bad actors. We see them quickly. We don't mess with them, and we move on. And the speed of that has allowed us to go pick good carriers and spend time with the good carriers and just only work with those. So there hasn't been much disruption. And where it has been disruption, Michael likes to call it friction, not disruption. And it has. They've caused friction, and then you realize really fast that something's not right here, and I need to find somebody else for my customer, and I need to get this load picked up by the right carrier. So it's been nothing but help, and avoiding fraud is all day, every day.
Yeah. What would you guys tell a company considering Turvo in terms of how to get successful adoption? Brad, you want to take that one as well?
I'm trying to understand. So like just successful adoption of Turvo?
I believe so, yes.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, like if you're interested in changing TMSs or starting with a new TMS, the simplicity of Turvo and the way it allows you to work and maneuver and work quickly, it's unbelievable. I've worked in the old systems. I never knew how much it slowed you down. And honestly, I thought Turvo did a lot of great things, and then we went into COVID, and it was the most unbelievable situation of just being able to work quick, be nimble, work through Turvo. Everything lives in there, all communication, rarely an email outside of your customers emailing you. It's just, it's easy to adopt because once you're in it, you realize that everything that can be done is done in there, and they're growing and changing a lot of things, and it's getting better pretty much every quarter. There's some giant release that makes it better. So I don't really think adopting Turvo is hard. I think once you're in it, you realize the overhead you need to move shipments is so much less, and focus on the right things at that point.
I'd be curious to see if Scott has anything to add to that. But from my seat, having worked with you all for 3 years now, I don't know if you give yourselves enough credit for it, but as an organization, Motus has really committed to it. And you all have a lot of experience in-house at Motus, and you have a lot of experience with kind of the old world. And both Turvo and Highway are innovative solutions, right? They're different than what the norm is, or kind of that old world that we lived in. And the reason that you have all been so successful with your tech stack, Turvo, Highway, is because you've committed to the adoption piece, because it's not easy. It doesn't just happen. You have to have an organizational strategy to do it. And both you and Scott, Brad, have driven that from the leadership perspective down, and you have that buy-in from the end user. So it's really, really important in your success that you've committed to it and made it happen.
Awesome. Really briefly. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when you see the problems that you're able to solve in the platform, the buy-in becomes really easy. You're like, hey, Johnny, check this out. Watch this. You need to figure out what happened here, whether it's a document or what happened on this date at this time, or tracking a load. It's all there. And that really, when they see that success or they solve the problem that they're having, the adoption kind of rolls downhill from there, I think.
Awesome. Really briefly, has your carrier base expanded, or has it reduced to a smaller but reliable list since using Highway?
I'd say it immediately reduced, but quickly expanded. I talked about it earlier. I mean, once we reduced the people out that didn't need to be there, we then replaced them with great carriers, and we're using so many different tools that are already in there. We're getting to know better carriers, and once a carrier can be set up through Highway, we know they're good. We want to go use them as much as possible. We don't want to fight the bad carriers. We don't want to deal with trying to onboard a carrier that doesn't need to be onboarded. So, I think it reduced at first, but we quickly picked up steam, and we've introduced a lot of new carriers to our network, and it's been because of that.
Awesome. And can we find any of you at F3 coming up in November?
I will be there, yes. So Turvo's going to be there. We'll have a booth. I believe one of our customers will be on What the Truck with our boy Dooner. And we'll be doing our 7-minute demo on stage as always. Michael, how about you? Will you be there with your beautiful red Jordans on? Yellow?
No, I gotta be yellow on brand. We'll be there. We're doing a rapid fire. Jordan Graff, our CEO, will be doing a fireside chat with Craig, and I'm gonna give one shameless plug on the carrier database expansion. Motor carriers that have registered with Highway and claim their identity, when they come in and register with another broker that's also a Highway broker, that onboard can take less than a minute. So one of the reasons Highway brokers see their carrier base expand quickly is because it's easy for a good carrier to work with a Highway broker. They don't have to go through a 20-minute onboard process. It gets 30 seconds if they want it to be. It's really, really fast. So what we're seeing is motor carriers stay within brokers that use highway because it's easier.
Awesome. Okay, well, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you to everyone again for taking the time to listen in, to Turvo for partnering with us on today's presentation, and of course to our speakers, Anthony, Michael, Brad, and Scott for being with us today. As previously mentioned, we'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow via the email that you guys used to register, and we hope that you'll join us again next time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.